with that, I'm really grateful to have you all here today, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Naomi Hirahara, who will be kicking off our program for us. Thank you so much, Naomi.
Hello, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here. I want to give out a special thanks to Janum and specifically Joy Yamaguchi and the other co-sponsor of our program, the Arcadia Public Library, as well as the California Civil Liberties Education Program for their support of the book and this program, as well as a special thanks to the late Karen Higa, who was one of the early ones to see the genius of J.T. Sata. To begin the program, we wanted to start off with a poem that I think reveals the essence of this book. And it was written by Frank Sata and myself. And the inspiration was one of J.T. Sata's photographs, which Frank calls The Crying Leaf. And I'm going to read it to you now. A man of few words, yet profound messages, passed down from father to son. Hung on a wall, a broken tennis racket, reminder to a frustrated teen, be calm and steady. Kuni-chan wa erai hito ni natte kure. Please, son, tada kuni, don't follow the whims of the world. Be centered and wise. Yoku asobe, yoku manabe. Play hard, study hard. Encamp in the Arkansas swampland, dandori, with other boys in white gi, free behind barbed wire. Classroom was indoors and out, lessons of life. Rolling stones gather no moss. Keep moving, from Kagoshima to Los Angeles to Jerome, Jerome to Gila, Gila to Phoenix, Phoenix to Guadalupe, Guadalupe to Pasadena. Your aged body now withered, you sit in a dark bedroom. The light of the Osenko burns orange next to your mother's photo. Now in the hospital, you ask me to shave you, suds of the shaving soap, the brush lathering your face. I carefully drag the razor against your jaw. I have not touched your face since childhood. From the beginning to the end, goodbye, my loving father. The leaf cries, full of nature's beauty, reveals our human weakness, a teardrop, a life of both pain and joy. Now I will be introducing Frank. So Frank, you could unmute yourself as well as turn on your video. Let's see. And I will be introducing Frank as well as Brian Takeda of the Nikkei Federation, who was the fiscal sponsor of this project. Frank Tadakuni Sata was born in Los Angeles in 1933. In 1942, at the age of 9, he was incarcerated with his parents, and one of them was J.T. Sata, first at the Santa Anita Assembly Center, then at Jerome and the Gila River concentration camps. He attended Pasadena City College. After serving in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Sata earned his bachelor's in architecture from USC in 1960. Sata held design positions at several architecture firms in LA. However, the 1960s civil rights and anti-war movements resonated with his social conscience. He directed his talents to the development of children's learning spaces, becoming staff architect for the Early Childhood Education Study of Massachusetts. For Head Start, he traveled the U.S. to Roxbury, Harlem, and Native American reservations, teaching educators to use prefabricated materials in classrooms and play spaces. Sata also served on Wilson Ryle's Early Childhood Task Force. Frank also established his own architectural design practice, designing civic and institutional buildings for West Covina, Pasadena, Monterey Park, Carson, and Cal State University system. Frank was also the member of the original JANM restoration team. In 2000, Frank was recognized as one of the 75 most distinguished alumni of Pasadena City College. Now, Brian Takeda is president of Affinity Associates, a program consulting business in Monrovia, California. He's also the co-owner of Creatively, a creative design, promotions, and coordination systems business with offices in Washington, D.C. and Monrovia. Brian continues to be extremely active in his community and has founded and served as a board member and officer for numerous cultural, community, and youth programs and organizations for 4 decades. So I'll quickly describe our program. So Frank and Brian will have a discussion over the larger issues of this book. Then we'll segue, and Frank and I will go through some of the visual images, the slides, and then it will conclude with our 2 co-sponsors, the Arcadia Public Library, as well as JANM, just explaining some of the resources that are available that are related to J.T. Sata's life and the larger story of Japanese Americans and the incarceration. So take it away, Brian and Frank.
Thank you, Naomi. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Frank very much for including me in this process to put together this book. This process was very personal to me. I recently lost my father, and for me to be able to participate in this process to document Frank's father's life took on particular importance to me. So I'd like to thank Frank for giving me this opportunity. The book, as you would all guess, really follows the life of Frank's father, J.T. Sata. J.T.'s family, he came from a family of nobility in Kagoshima. But the story about J.T.'s mother is actually extraordinary. And she had a huge influence in J.T.'s life. And what I'd like to ask you, Frank, is your J.T.'s father passed away when J.T. was very young. And so your mom, J.T.'s mom, Kino, pretty much raised J.T. through his childhood, through his developmental age. But, I'd like you to share, what influence you think that Kino, your grandmother, had on J.T.'s life.
As you know, Brian, I discovered my grandmother just 2 years ago. And when I learned about her history, I tried to quickly record a few things that might help people draw their own conclusion about her. Because as many people know, the Meiji Restoration, I think, was 1870s, and my grandmother was born several years before that. So her family and the situation that she went through in Japan that yet did not have a transportation system because the Restoration created the movement to develop technology. She traversed many places, all of Japan, and To give you an idea, my dad was born when she was 37. His sister, next sister, was born when my grandmother was 35. And the first sister was born when my grandmother was 32. Now, if you can imagine that when my dad was born, and we're not certain whether he was born in Kagoshima or Sapporo anymore. We don't have any records. But we found that his sister was born in Sapporo, and my dad always thought he was born in Kagoshima. So his upbringing was clearly strong Kagoshima roots. And so there's a lot of mystery yet to resolve, and I'm really curious. But last night I figured out the ages. You know, I can't imagine anyone traveling Japan from Sapporo all the way to Kagoshima at age 37 was another child. In other words, my dad's sister would have been about 2 years old. And so we're uncertain now where he was actually born. But we do know the father died in Sapporo before my dad was born. So he was raised by a single mother who traversed most of Japan several times. And as far as Okinawa, because her daughter, my aunt, went to school in Okinawa in her teens. And so it's a unique situation that we are, I can't really say for sure, but I think one could conclude, that this woman was exceptional. And my dad didn't leave Japan until the year she died, which was, she died at a little over 59, not quite 60.
Yeah. So, your father, obviously he was very talented artistically. And you mentioned in the book, it's mentioned in the book that he was very interested in Western art. And I know it was also mentioned that your father discovered photography while he was young in Japan. And so did his mother encourage him to pursue art, or did he do it on his own? It's very interesting because it's not typical for a young man, in Japan at that time.
Well, we kind of, you and I have discussed the fact that culture and art is usually, people discover this as you get further up the scale, you might say, in life, in freedom, and well, I don't want to say wealth, because at that time it was the termination of the samurais, and there was a lot of difficulty, of course. But I think her roots clearly suggest that she was already very cultured and in the arts, and obviously had a great deal of influence and encouraged pursuing whatever he was interested in pursuing. I don't think she directed him to do this or that. I think the little article at Westridge, he kind of suggested that he discovered photography actually at 23, which would mean he came here. So they did have, photographers and some cameras about the time he was a young person. I did see that in the museum. So, we're not sure of any of these things, but, that's all I know about it. The only time he was interviewed was at Westridge School,
Yeah. So when, your grandmother, JT's mom, passed away earlier in the same year that JT came to America. And, as I thought about that, I'm sure, your father was probably thinking about a lot of things about his life. But essentially, he was alone. His father had passed away. He never really knew his father. His mom just recently passed away. He could have stayed in Japan, and he could have lived a very comfortable life because of his family, his their lineage, their noble lineage. But I'm always curious as to what might have motivated him to come to America.
Yeah, well, so am I, because I'm only thankful, and I think we talked about why this book and why the book now, but
yeah,
it seems quite appropriate this year, in 2020, that, well, why now answer would be obviously because I'm 87 now and have so many years left, but it's been a fascinating discovery for me because it never occurred to me that my father had a mother. I didn't realize I had a grandmother on my father's side. We never discussed that. And so now, you see, everybody had a struggle. I think, I don't want to say he's different. Toyo Miyatake told me he was different. I knew Toyo well. And I think there must have been, obviously, the way he carried himself, or perhaps the way he thought about things. Maybe there was some difference. And I would think so, because he did carry values that perhaps people that only had to strive to survive might not have had the chance to really think about. He was, without telling me directly, and I have to try to interpret the drawings and the way he behaved as messages in the language, between us. It was not verbal. And I think, as I told Naomi, she captured it all in the poem, because it's not something I didn't know or didn't feel, but it's something I didn't know, you might say, intellectually in words. I just recently, because we're doing a little thing about, my journey, and that it was in 1971, I had actually thought about this kind of thing, and it was my impression of the leaf, and but because I wasn't, born to be a writer, and I had to communicate with drawings because our experience in camp, as a youngster, that was never, my bailiwick to document all this stuff in words. So,
yeah,
wonderful that Naomi appeared for, she was available for a month, and it's like, one of those blessings, part of my life.
Yeah, most definitely. That's true. That's true. So, later on in this program, you'll be going through several pictures, a lot of photos and paintings and so forth that JT did. And a lot of it covers his experience while in camp. And, I was curious, he comes to America as a young man. He probably had a lot of aspirations for himself, wanted to discover art. But then, he gets married, has a son, you, but then you end up in camp. And, I don't want to describe what it was like to be in camp, but I'm more curious as, what effect camp what effect that might have had on his art. Did it change him? Did he, I'm sure it affected his view of the world. And, is that reflected in his work from that point on? Is it, were you able to see a difference between what he had done before the war and then some of the work he did after the war?
Well, yeah, I've thought about this much more recently because of the book and so forth. But clearly, the Western thinking occurred when he first got into photography, and that shows what he did. Now, apparently, he still wanted to be a painter, and then, well, we have to put in the Depression period. See, that's when I'm born, right, in the period Depression. So there's a lot of things that impact, obviously economics. So he did quit photography early on, and even before camp. But I think that I've thought about that. I'm not sure exactly whether he changed gears. I know he didn't try to do serious photography after that, other than doing what Westridge asked him to do. So I'm not really sure. I've been thinking a lot about that. I think, the bottom line I want to say is that any of us Asians ought to be thankful that we're here in this country. And I know there are many, many issues, but I'm so thankful that he left Japan and came here. That to me, I can't, and that's part of the purpose of the book, is to try to show, at least share that, all of them, all the Issei, they came on different journeys for different reasons. They had different struggles, and I'm extremely respectful and thankful about the whole journey of all the Issei, because it's allowed, my dad allowed me to have the kind of life that I have no regrets. And, that's, I can't say much more than that in that respect.
Yeah. No, I think I understand. Expressing gratitude for, for what our parents and our grandparents have endured, right? But yet providing us with, myself, as a sansei, my father was Issei, but my mother was Nisei. But, providing us with the opportunities that we've had, being here in America. My final question is, as I had mentioned earlier, your dad's upbringing was very different than most immigrants, from Japan. And, you refer to him as being different. You mentioned that he was an outlier. So describe to us, what does that mean to you, that he was an outlier?
That's a word beyond me. I had a very good friend that said that, when he read the book. He was, when I consider everything he went through, he still held himself high. He didn't brag about it. He was very proud. I think it's been fascinating to sort of trace recently because of this program. I put some other numbers together, but I don't want to get into too much of that right now. Essentially, what he did, it's like if anybody that knows sports, you think about a relay team, track relay team, where it's a 400, 800 relay, and he was the first leg. He's given that baton to me, and I'm kind of ready to pass it on. And I think that's, and we're all trying to win. So I don't know if that's what, we're referring to. I'm extremely proud to be Asian. And even though I was denying it through periods because of, the situations, and I, like many of us that are my peers, we knew how to stay in our place, if that's the right word. And I've heard many of the Blacks say the same kind of thing, where you know your place. And that was a skill, I think, that was necessary. And I'm hoping that the generations from now don't even have to think about that.
Yeah.
No,
I agree. These are extraordinary times.
You are, yeah.
Yeah, these are extraordinary. There's a lot of parallels. What happened to Japanese Americans to what we see what's going on today. But I think what I like to do now, Naomi, is I hope all of our viewers are ready to see some of the images, the fantastic images that are in this book here behind my shoulder. I think, it'll be very interesting to hear Frank's take on all of these images. So thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, so for this portion of the program, Frank and I will be going through JT's wonderful collection of work. This is just a sampling. Frank, can you, I believe this was your father's, one of his favorite images. It was called Homeward. Can you tell us more about it?
I think he called it Homeward Bound. But then I didn't know it was until we rediscovered the article at Westridge School that he indicated it was his. And so at first I was wondering which way he was suggesting that home was. So many people wanted to go back to Japan, if you will. But then when I now know his whole story, he really had no reason to go back to Japan. So I think this was just the end of a day kind of thought process that might have gone into this picture.
I guess I didn't clearly state from the beginning a little bit more about JT's chronology. After World War II, he got a job as a janitor at Westridge School for girls, and he took and then he was heralded. We'll talk more about that, but and I think too, Frank, we weren't quite sure where this photo was taken. We thought maybe Imperial Valley, but that article says this photo was taken in El Segundo.
Right. And I'm still not sure, because there are things that Tim Mosselman pointed out to me, and but that's very possible. It could have been, he did have a car early on. So
tell us about this.
Yeah, this is my grandmother on the left, and she's the woman I really never knew till 2 years ago. His sister, my dad, is on the right, and that's his older sister. She was only 2 years older. So it shows him with a tennis racket. And his life was strictly art and tennis, if you want to just simplify it. I mean, he loved music, he loved everything in the arts, and, tennis obviously was the most important sport. He liked baseball too, I should say. Okay, I guess I've forgotten how many series we have. I won't know the pictures, but these are a series of sketches that were in this one book and that was donated to JANM. And they're in a sketchbook that's easy to handle. They're essentially all the one size. They're what about 4x6 or 5x6, something of that nature. And but I was amazed at the quality of the drawings, and okay, now we're into
I'm sorry. I did that accidentally. Keep going. Keep going.
High tech. But anyway, so he did these. So he would have been about 16, 17, 18. One of them that says 1913. And my feeling is he recorded his city. This is Kagoshima City, because the gentleman at the university, when he saw these images, quickly could identify where my dad made many of these sketches. So anyone from Kagoshima City might recognize these locations. I don't know anything about it other than as a collection that I think he wanted to. My personal feeling now is I think he was almost ready to go to college, perhaps, and he wanted to record his life as a young man from Kagoshima. So, go ahead.
And then some people may not really understand the geography of Kagoshima and what it's known for. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the heart of the samurai, right?
Well, and also this direction, the lower drawing, you'll see the edge of Sakurajima, which anyone that goes that way or from the area, that's sort of their sacred landmark, the Sakurajima, which happens to be slowly erupting right now. So that's kind of ironical. But
Frank,
he didn't focus. Go ahead. Yeah.
Someone in the chat named DJ, I don't know if it might be one of your friends, he writes, regarding the tennis racket, I wonder if the tennis racket and fondness is parallel with the emperor's fondness of tennis at the time in Japan.
Yeah, I think Meiji, it's my understanding that Meiji University had one of the better tennis teams. I saw that on a bio of an artist that came later from Japan, but he was proud of being a tennis player at Meiji.
Okay, so this is an example of one of JT's famous black and white photos. So can you tell us more about this photo? That it was taken, first of all, about when was it taken? And
I wish I could tell you. I'm not sure, because this is part of the collection that he kept together in a box, and they're all donated to JANM. And the striking thing about this is it is, in my opinion, very Western, and I would say many of his photos were what they categorize from architectural art terms as modernist, part of the modernist movement, where there was influence from Germany and places like that. And it is, in a form of abstract art. And I didn't understand how he did it till just recently. A photographer that helped us he knew what JT did. he took that diagonal line and he folded it. And so he has a three-dimensional image of the marbles on a large field.
So I think two experts have been seminal in the discovery of JT's work. One, as I mentioned earlier, was the late Karen Higa, and we also have Dennis Reed as well, and he has incorporated JT's work in some exhibitions, right?
Yeah, that was the one done at Janum. I forgot what that was called. But it was all the collection of all the early Japanese, mostly Issei. Well, I think they were all Issei that Dennis was able to find, and he put on a very large exhibit.
Now, this is one of your favorites. So why? Why do you like this one?
Yeah, well, see, this is what it's all about from my point of view and everything I learned. It's about children. It's about, for me, that's what is sort of eternal hope. I don't like to use the hope since Obama used it so well, but it is tomorrow, and there's no tomorrow without children. And maybe this is what, I'm surrounded with this type of thing that led me to get involved in the Head Start movement. And, parenting is so different. There's no way, there's no single way. And we learn so much about how complex that the whole process is, that the children are all different. And so, yeah, I'm sort of inspired by this type of thing. It gives me a lot of hope. I want to be optimistic, and I would want anyone to look at his work to think that way.
So up to now, most of his work, up to World War II, that's most of the photography all of the photography we've seen so far was taken before World War II. And he lived up to this time in Los Angeles, is that correct? And whereabouts in Los Angeles did you spend your early years?
Well, we moved quite a bit, and I don't know the whole trail of our journey, but I think this is an artist. I think this is because of my father being an artist, and he after he married my mother, and then I was born. This is what many men do, not all, but many. The focus of the day-to-day life, and so he started working in more standard places, and I think he was working in grocery as well as in Iwata and other places. But so we moved several times, and before camp, we lived on Hobart, near Hobart School. And it was because my dad had an accident early in his life too, about the time he married my mother. And that caused some, I'm sure, anguish for him. And he couldn't drive. So he walked. We moved from place to place. For example, before Hobart, we lived near Pico, Irola, which there was a train station of the P cars, and then before camp, it was near Olympic, which had a bus line. So this, I think, you mentioned the striking nature of this sketch. So since he had quit photography, and he didn't try to take his camera, he just took a bunch of colored pencils and
let's kind of set the stage for this. This is my favorite sketch in the whole book.
Yeah.
So when the Executive Order 9066, so this is where we go into the 9066 portion of our program, FDR, he put out an executive order allowing for the mass incarceration and forced removal and incarceration of Japanese Americans. So you reported to St. Mary's, right, Episcopal Church.
Right.
And then from there, tell us what happened. You had, your suitcase.
Well, yeah, they had buses running from St. Mary's to camp. I don't know how many. I just remember the bus ride. And it, one of my best friends that went to all the camps, the same camps with us because they were family friends. His father happened to have a car, so I didn't remember that he went to camp in a car, but we were taken by bus. They were.
And where were you taken?
To Santa Anita from St. Mary's Church. So there were several buses, as I recall, and that wasn't that long a bus ride. Santa Anita's not too far.
I wanted to read a brief poem that we kind of cobbled together from your memories. It's called Horse Stable, and it goes along with this image. 3 of us, 3 cots, 3 suitcases, 1 roll of toilet paper, 1 family, home sweet home. So I think the notable thing about this sketch is how the 3 beds are all placed, close together. And then I know it's kind of hard to see, but there's a roll of toilet paper that's kind of hanging from the frames of one of the beds. And it kind of just reminded me of kind of what we're going through right now through the pandemic. Like people are, concerned about toilet paper. And then there's other very poignant details, like the shoes that are on the bottom. We don't really have that many images of the Santa Anita Assembly Center. So to have like an image like this, I think is very poignant. And is that a mosquito net that's above the beds or what?
That's right. That's a mosquito net.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one mosquito net. And I think, as I've mentioned to others, this is what reminds me also of what's going on at the border, the Mexican border. What it reminds me of is how, I was fortunate. I'm in the center, so I was always protected. So this is why my perspective perhaps on camp is a little bit different, there was always this type of feeling. My parents protected me from the harsh reality. I realized and I know that it was not easy, but how I try to present the experience is in a way that, more people can understand it. I have to try to keep from being angry about it, but I do carry some anger, as some people have mentioned. But perhaps it's more the inspiration to try to share the reality of our trip. This is an American story. It's a Japanese American story, and it's very American.
So I think you're contrasting the experience right now of families being separated, right, at the border, and how that's so different. I mean, you can't probably imagine, if you were separated from your parents at that particular time in World War II.
And I've talked to Satsuki about it because she spends a lot of time, and she has good reasons to do that because of her journey, which was quite the opposite of mine, and this is it's still the same reminder that we have to share you know, we're a very small minority when you think of the numbers that experience this. But then what's interesting is there's also a collective majority that, you know, I found that camp, you know, the different camp became sort of a hub of a community. So they had all these camp reunions, and if anybody goes to a camp reunion, well, you know, the younger people didn't go to camp, so they don't quite understand what those reunions were about. And it was, as I observed them, you know, people had this common bond. And so these reunions were helpful for many people, you know, and
well, DJ, I'm going to make read one of the comments. I think DJ, I don't know who that is has made another comment here. I had heard how much bugs there were in Arkansas from my family. What an ingenious way to keep the bugs off with a sleeping net. I love the detail of your father's drawing with the roll of teepee strapped to the bed for ease of reach. So that was DJ's comment there. So let's go to the next.
This is in camp, you know, this is Mosquito because of horse stable, right? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So I think this was Brian. Brian really liked this image because for anybody who has been to Santa Anita in the past, this is very recognizable. So tell us a little bit more about this image.
Well, that's how, you know, Mother hung the laundry, you know, because she had to go somewhere else to do the laundry by hand. And but the window to the left is the one that my bunk was against that wall, and it was a very small unit, but because it's only 3, and there's just space for maybe 3 cots, and maybe it was as big as 4 cots with a space in between. You know, that was the size of the room. But this always reminds me of my watch sitting at the window when they had the riots and the tanks. They weren't tanks; they were half track, I guess. You know, where they had guns mounted on the back and that type of thing, big guns, and they were rolling through that roadway right there. And so I have vivid memories about that, because first time I really saw some big weapons.
Can you tell us more about these images?
Yes, the one on the left is the sketch he made of the carving that he would be doing. I'm not sure. I know I used that knife too. I did that little piece on the left because I think I did observe him doing many carvings, but I believe this is a sketch of Seabiscuit, and it was made from the end of one of those apple boxes or something. It's pine boxes that they used to put fruits and things, and he took the end unit, and so it's only about 3/4 inch thick, but he made his carving. And
then some of that is your work, right, on the left-hand side.
Yeah, you remember the guitar. Well, many, I think younger kids might have made these guitars too.
I wanted to just clarify about the riots that happened in Santa Anita. We have a little section in the book. In August 1942, a disturbance arose from a routine contraband search. Soon 200 military police officers were dispatched to quiet 2,000 protesters. We had an end room, and from the window, this is what you said, I saw soldiers in half-track armored trucks responding to a declaration of martial law. They patrolled inside the center for 3 days before finally withdrawing. nothing else like that transpired in Santa Anita. So I don't think people are familiar with the Manzanar riots, but I don't think people knew about what had happened in Santa Anita.
Well,
Okay, from Santa Anita.
Comment about Santa Anita is that because they made that camp so quick, there was a lot of sewage problems, and I remember that because they had a lot of the sewage being broken, and there was a lot of flooding of sewage waste.
So tell us about now from Santa Anita. You were moved to Jerome. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, we boarded a train, and I'm not sure how close the train tracks were. It must have been pretty close to Santa Anita. Actually, there is a track near there. So we boarded the train, and I recall it was about 3-4 days. I'll never forget it seems like it took forever to cross Texas. And the reason I refer to that is we drove through that area too later on, across Texas. And I recall how long it was. But by train, it's been written by many people about how the blinds were pulled down and so forth. But most kids like myself, we peeked out and we can kind of see when we were going through a city. But I just remember it being pretty long. Yeah.
And the temperatures, tell us more about the weather that you faced in Jerome, Arkansas.
I think when you get to Arkansas, then it's a shock. I don't know exactly what month, because this is obviously in the winter months. I don't recall when we got there. I don't think it was snowing when we got. I'm sure it wasn't, but we do have some snapshots that I included. But see, Dad, JTS tried to capture just the essence of the environment, actually more where it was pleasant. This is on the border, and we were in one of the blocks that were adjacent. And I think they didn't quite, I think they put the units up in a hurry later. They had cleared the land of the trees early on, but see, all of the, most of these that he sketched were in our area, which was the edge of the forest. And this is but a lot of it was cleared out, kind of like Rower, which was cleared out, they took all the trees down. I think for the ease of construction and so forth, and then maybe they decided they needed a few more. So here's this. So you see on the left, you can see the barracks, the standard barracks of most of the camp. And I feel, fortunate that I was in the edge unit that had all the forest, and we were also adjacent to the bayou and the swamps and things, and young kids like myself, we could go and explore. I don't recall whether they had any sophisticated fencing. They might have had 3 rungs of barbed wire or something. I don't recall climbing over to get out, but there wasn't too far you want to go anyway because of all the water moccasins and other kinds of snakes in that area. So we didn't go through.
Was your father's, one of his, he really liked this painting, right?
Yeah. This is one that's a little bit larger than, it's much larger than the oil painting. I would say it's more like 24 by 36 size. And he had it framed early on, and he always, it traveled with us from camp to camp, and also in Phoenix to Guadalupe to Pasadena. So I remember it well, and I remember camp well because of how he kept it, you know, as a presence in my mind. But he never talked about it. He didn't tell me about the struggles or those things.
Now, this is our cover shot. So can you explain why you chose this for the cover?
Yeah, that's my favorite because, you know, as I said to Brian, you know, I'm very patriotic, and it represents, for me, all the cultures, all the colors in nature. You could see how, you know, our country is made up of all the colors that one can find within this drawing. And it also, it's universal. It's a universal type of language. You know, you go anywhere in the world and you can see this autumn leaves. So it is, again, it's a very profound image for me. It's continually changing. It's a reminder about his philosophy, and it gives me a lot of strength to see things like this.
Now, these are snapshots from Jerome. Did you?
You know, we're unlike most families. You know, we knew people under 442, of course. So there's, you know, and I don't, you know, there was also relatives too, but it shows the contrast in weather, you know, the flooding, the icicles, what my dad had to chop the wood for burning in the wood stove. And there's my dad painting with friends watching. So I think it's sort of a nice, you know, quick snap of what it was like. And you know, the 442 people did come to Jerome and visit.
Because they were stationed pretty close, right, in Mississippi.
Yeah. And, you know, there's been stories written about them. Yeah, they're young guys, just like any young guy. They ran into just hoping to meet a lot of young girls. And I think, and I know so many, and I think Danny Noah talked about, you know, how many of them were shocked, you know, the guys from Hawaii especially, of their first experience. And because there used to be conflicts, you know, within the guys, the mainland guys and the 442 guys, you know, that kind of stuff. And that occurred in Aurora too, I know, to a degree. So.
Now from Jerome, I guess the camp closed. So again, you were forced to move. And this time you had to go to, well, you went to Gila River, Arizona. So can you tell us more about that move as well as this painting? Yeah,
I think right away I could recognize if anyone goes to the desert, and really, you know, the hot heat of the desert is the only reason people go there, because the sky is really beautiful. But it's also very hot. And I think for me, that's what says it all. It reminds me of how hot it was. And I never knew about what they call swamp coolers. And of course, young people don't know too much about swamp coolers, which is nothing more than water dripping down, kind of like dry straw, and a fan blowing through, so the air is going through the mesh, if you will. And that was the cooling system. And of course, this temperature was, you know, 110, 120, and we're coming from freezing under 30 degrees. So it was a shock. And I think my mother took the brunt of all of this. Yeah, it was pretty traumatic for her.
This is another shot from Gila
Yeah.
River.
Again, even there, I think it shows he looks for the beauty of the desert, even though it's mercilessly hot. And I just remember things like scorpions and things like that. They're pretty scary.
Now, from Gila River, you moved to Phoenix.
And I think the 3 picture snapshots on Phoenix, I think this is there was a small unit behind this large mansion-like house in Phoenix, and it was located outside of Phoenix proper, but now it's almost part of the city, I think. So it was a little old house, wooden house, and not in very good shape, but my dad made sure that I had a corner to study in. So that kind of shows the 3 of us, and see how he has a kobu on display. And then I think you'll see the edge of the picture on the upper picture on the left of the 3 of us. There's, I think that's the camp picture that he hung on the wall.
So the kobu is like a found, like, tree branch that people just constantly rub, and it smooth it over, and becomes a piece of art.
And many of the Issei, they either filed it down or they scraped it down. There's a lot of handwork involved, where they use their natural oil from their hand or from other linseed oil, things like that. And then on the left, he was, in order to make a living in Guadalupe, they were able to, I guess, rent this little unit right on the corner of this really junky building. It's all behind this plaster facade is nothing but a corrugated metal building. And my parents tried to open a small restaurant. My mother did the cooking, my dad did the cleanup work, and they made that somehow last for a year. And so both of these stops are, again, he made sure that I got credit for a year of schooling. So they're kind of timed with my school year. And that's how we ended up coming out here, was at the end of I was at Santa Maria High School in Guadalupe in the 9th grade. And at the end of that school year, I did work on the farm that summer. And then my dad found a job in Pasadena at Westridge School. So I never lost school years, which actually I graduated high school a little bit younger than a lot of others.
There was a question about why you moved from Jerome to Gila, and I think I mentioned it, but Jerome had closed in June of 1944, and because the Satas really didn't have any place to go, they had to be moved to another camp, Gila River, which was still open. And actually, they were in Gila River until Halloween, around this time, 1945, which was at least a year and a half after the formal end of World War II. And it was because you had nowhere else to go, right?
Well, as I heard through the grapevine, is my dad resisted going out till they found him a job. Mm. And the owners of they were a wealthy family, and they at that time, and they owned the largest department store in the city of Phoenix, which was called Corix. And the irony is Cian, who's helping me now, is the first one that knows the store. She even knows some of the descendants of the owners. And this is, yeah.
And then from Phoenix, you
Yeah.
go to, where did you go?
Well, then, no, Phoenix to Guadalupe. So,
Oh, in Guadalupe, yeah. From Guadalupe, where did you go?
in the 9th grade, and then I came to Pasadena, and Pasadena was on a different system. So I went back to junior high school in the 10th grade in Pasadena, and then I went to Pasadena High School. But this is Westridge School, and we didn't move initially into this building behind us. We were first in a garage apartment. There was a 3-car garage, and there was a big living space up above. And then when the school decided to expand, they tore that building down, and they moved us into this place, which was a mansion on Orange Grove. Yeah.
So at first, no one knew about your father, JT's illustrious photographic and artistic talents, but I guess the word got out, and Spyglass was the campus newspaper. And I loved this headline: Mr. Sata discovered internationally acclaimed, and there's a exclamation mark. So, and then what did your father do? I know he was a janitor, but didn't he do other things for the school?
Well, in those days, the school wasn't that big, and it was a pretty exclusive school, and they, people, very wealthy people, and most of the people, the better schools like that, even to this day, they teach the arts. So I think my dad somehow became acquainted with the art teacher, and I do believe eventually then some of the people on the board discovered what he could do and what he did as an artist. And they did do a show on the campus, which they didn't have a space, so they used the homeroom and other place in the administration. And that's how the story developed, when he was recognized as someone who did some fine art. And along with that, because of his love of tennis, that's where I learned tennis. And the tennis coach there happened to be also the coach of the Valley Hunt Club, which is still exclusive to this day. And that's where I played tennis as well. So I kind of broke the ice early on, if you will, on the west side.
I want to make sure our time is getting short. So I want to quickly, there was a question if you're an only child. Yes, Frank was an only child. And Susie Ling asked how you got your job at Westridge from Guadalupe.
Yeah, some people might know the Kawagoe, Tech Kawagoe, because Helen Kawagoe was sort of known quite well as city clerk of Carson. And Tech, I believe, was the gardener at that time. And I do believe Tech is somehow distantly related because we were close to the Kawagoe family. And Dave and his Tech's brothers, Dave and Frank, were members of 442. And Dale Sata does a lot of, and I think her daughter works with 442 group. But the interesting, I don't know if you know about Tech, because he was a marvelous athlete, and he was actually Olympic level gymnast when camp started. And he used to show me how he can tumble and all this stuff right there on the Westridge lawn. And so Westridge has a lot of reminders, if you will, for me. It was like, a real oasis, having a mansion and having a large place. Even though my room was really tiny, my father's quarters and my parents' upstairs was quite small, but it was comfortable since we didn't have a whole lot of furniture anyway. So
I'm going to quickly go through the next slides because we have to go. This was a banner that in 1962, JT visited Japan after so many decades of being away. And this is a tanka, a poem so JT had actually created this banner. So this is his work. And I'll read you the tanka. He wrote, "So excited to return to Yakushima. I left Urashima's box in America." And of course, he's referring to the classic story, Urashima Taro, in which Urashima Taro was given a mysterious box and told never to open it. And then he opens a box and then it transforms him into an old man because 300 years instead of several days have passed. So that's this one. And this is our final image. So Frank, can you tell us about this final image?
Well, I think Brian made a comment when he saw this too, that all the gardeners did the same thing, the using of the palm tree as a way to sweep a lot of keep the hardcourts clean. And every time he had a chance, he would pick up the palm leaf like this, and then he groom it in a way that it served him well, and he could sweep a large area. So I had a lot of mixed emotions about this, and because I went through a period as a youngster in having to address, I had to interpret for my parents. So when I started school again in Pasadena, they asked a lot of questions. And when they asked me about what my dad did for a living, and I had difficulty, answering. And then the word janitor implied to me at that time something sort of lowly or whatever, because there weren't too many people I knew that did janitor. To be a gardener would have been even easier, but see, he couldn't walk well, so I wanted this as a end image just because of the contrast of this man that came at 22 that we have in the front of the book, which was a self-portrait as soon as he started doing photo work. And I don't know who took this picture, but I think what it points out to me that it didn't, at this point in my life, it doesn't change my respect at all. In fact, I see sort of dignity in the photo. I'm kind of proud of this man. It was easier to look at the first beginning picture and see, wow, this artist, and pretty neat self-photo. But this is humbling too. It's how he could carry himself and do what he did, and then to be accepted, by the board and many people on the board who, from another class. They're the old rich of Pasadena.
Thank you so much, Frank. I'm going to be introducing our two next speakers. They're going to speak very briefly. It's going to end with Sean Iwaoka, who's with the Japanese American National Museum as the collections associate and part of the museum's collections management and access department. He is responsible for supporting the care and preservation of the National Museum's permanent collection. Prior to joining the National Museum, Sean worked as a project archivist at UCLA in coordination between its graduate division and university archives, and was an archival intern with the National Archives and Records Administration. Beginning in May 2020, Sean has created and produced JANM's Unboxed video series, which highlights artifacts and stories from JANM's permanent collection. And he's done this really cool video, which I think is a nice summary of everything we've talked about. But before that, we will be hearing from Yvonne Eng. And I actually got to know Yvonne Eng years ago. We were doing a survey of the old areas of Pasadena that had like Japanese businesses in 1941. But Yvonne is a librarian at the Arcadia Public Library, and her special area is local Arcadia history.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about the history of Santa Anita Park and how researchers can access the library's historical collections. Santa Anita Park opened in 1934. It is located on Huntington Drive between Baldwin Avenue and Colorado Street in Arcadia, California. In 1940, the famous racehorse Seabiscuit won the Santa Anita Handicap. In March 1942, the U.S. War Department commandeered the entire Santa Anita Park to serve as an assembly center for the next 6 months. Soon, more than 400 tar paper barracks went up on the parking lot, built by the Army Corps of Engineers. The Japanese Americans arrived at Santa Anita by Pacific Electric train and by private car and by bus, as Frank just told us. Upon arrival, they received colored meal buttons numbered 1, 2, or 3 for their mess hall assignments. The initial groups of 8,000 people were assigned to live in the stables, and the rest were assigned to the barracks. By June 1st, it was at capacity with 19,000 people. The city within a city had nearly twice the population of Arcadia. The grounds were surrounded by barbed and electrified high wire fences. Armed guards stood on lookout towers around the clock, and floodlights lit up the fence at night. The Assembly Center contained a hospital, laundry building, drying yard, huge shower building, post office, a 6,420-gallon water heater, and a fire station manned by the Japanese Americans. The prisoners published their own newspaper called The Pacemaker. By September of 42, the Japanese Americans were being moved to permanent camps in isolated inland areas. By late October, the Assembly Center was empty. Santa Anita Park has California State Historical Landmark status to recognize its use as a temporary detention camp. A plaque is there on site. After the Assembly Center closed, the racetrack was used as an Army Ordnance Training Center until 1945. Racing resumed May 15, 1945. Right now, I would like to show you the library's online resources. So you can access the camp newspaper, The Pacemaker, if you go to our library website and click on Arcadia History Room, and then Arcadia History eBooks and digitized content, and scroll down to The Pacemaker and just click on any of those dates Here's one issue, and it shows that the first baby was born there to the Yoshidas. You can also access our searchable databases if you jump from the Arcadia History Room page to our online collection. And let me just click on this quick start button, Santa Anita Assembly Center, and we can narrow down the search to photographs. And here are photos that we got from the National Archives, and the photographer was named Clem Albers. You can also search our newspaper index and our subject files. And our subject files are hard copies of documents and articles. So I'll just mention that the Gilb Museum of Arcadia Heritage also has Santa Anita Assembly Center collections on permanent display. And the library and the Gilb Museum are the same department within the city of Arcadia. So whenever the library reopens, we will resume setting up appointments for researchers interested in the Santa Anita Assembly Center collection. And that's it from me. Thank you, Naomi, Frank, Brian, Joy, and Sean for inviting me to be part of this presentation.
And now we'll have the video from Sean Iwaoka.
Hi, my name is Sean Iwaoka, and I'm a collections associate at the Japanese American National Museum. And I'd like to give you a look at one of JANM's largest fine arts photography collections. On the first floor of JANM's permanent collection is its photographic archives, which includes the work of J.T. Sata. Donated to JANM in 2005 by J.T. Sata's only son, Frank, and organized by JANM's late curator, Karen Higa, the Sata collection is unique both in its size and the excellent quality of its prints. The collection is made up of 143 matted photographs taken in the 1920s and 1930s, 315 4x5 negatives, approximately 200 contact prints, 2 scrapbooks, a camera and photography equipment, medallions, letters, and a sketchbook. The majority of the collection is the 143 gelatin silver prints. In remarkable condition, it is these photographs from the 1920s and 30s that J.T. Sata, at the start of World War II, entrusted to a European-American family for safekeeping for the duration of the war. Matted, with Sata's signature still visible, a selection of these photographs were exhibited in 1986 under the curation of Dennis Reed at the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center, and again in 2016 with JANM's exhibit Making Waves, Japanese American Photography, 1920 through 1940. And among these photographs is J.T. Sata's scrapbook. Programs for photography exhibitions, newspaper clippings, salon and gallery announcements, certificates and awards have been collected and arranged by Sata himself, documenting his artistic career. Carefully arranged are programs from the Japanese camera pictorialists of California and gallery announcements from across Western Europe. There is a permit for an art club he started at Gila River and a Westridge school playbill mentioning his work with the school production of The Mikado. Like many scrapbooks and photo albums donated to JANM, its pages have been interleafed with acid-free paper to minimize deterioration, and the book itself has been left intact in order to preserve its maker's intention and personalized curation. A rich historical resource, it complements the fine art photography in the rest of the collection and documents J.T. Sata's work and legacy.
Really wonderful. What I wanted to suggest, because Frank, you have a lot of people making comments who actually went to Westridge, remembers your father, and has more questions. But I know we're getting to the tail end of our program, so I was wondering, Joy, should we just formally end our program, but still kind of continue maybe for 10 more minutes? Like whoever wants to hang around, they could hang around, and we could have continue this conversation. I don't know what you would suggest. Or okay, so we'll just continue. And if you need to go, we understand. But let's see. There was some initial. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Michael Coleman. I'll start with the people with connections to Westridge. This is not a question. I don't know if you know of this Michael Coleman. I went to Westridge and my mother taught there for 19 years, leaving in 1975 or so. I know that she knew, I don't think this is Michael Coleman. This might be another person under that name. But anyway, she knew Mr. Sata, and apparently they had good relationship because when I married my husband, Mr. Sata gave her a lovely gift of tiles with birds on it to give to me for a wedding gift. My mother's name was Barbara Morse. She had passed away long ago, but I know she would love this program. It's from Sandra Coleman. And then another, I think on the chat, I believe I saw some other people from also who had gone over, who had been at Westridge. I can't seem to find it, but you could put it under the Q&A so I could find it more easily. And there's a couple of really important questions here. One is, how is it that you, Frank, have so much love and passion for a country that incarcerated you and your family during World War II because of where your family was from? And this question's from April of Arcadia. Oh, you got to unmute, Frank. You have to unmute.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think one needs to understand, first of all, my name, Franklin, is named after Franklin Delano Roosevelt. My middle name is Tadakuni, which is in Japanese means loyalty to country. My father raised me without prejudice to try. I don't want to get too deep into this, but for me, it's never been a question. I served 2 years in the military, and I know what it feels like to march behind a flag. There are things that I've had to overcome, and it's still, as you get older, you get a little more emotional. And so, when I sing the Star Spangled Banner, which I used to at all the football games at USC that I went to, I have a hard time sometimes finishing the whole, what that means to me. And, but it doesn't change my feeling, my understanding. I think we're still a country that is trying to build its own culture. I don't think we have what I would call a united culture that is representative yet of our country. So I feel a part of it. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, Naomi. You help me with that.
No, that's a good answer.
It's feel, yeah.
We have a comment from LT Saito. Frank, as a student at Westridge from 1957 to 1963, I recall your father's gracious presence at our school. So another person that remembers your father. And then Leah Fujitaki. Oh, and then there was another remembrance. I think it was Jessica Kashiwabara. Thank you, Mr. Sata, for sharing these stories and images. My grandfather, Ichiro Itani, was a friend of JT and fellow photographer. So Jessica's very happy to hear your history. And then I guess this is our last question. Leah Fujitaki asks, did JT's artistic talent have any influence on Frank's decision to become an architect?
I don't know. For me, this whole journey just kind of happened along the way. He never suggested. I didn't even know what architect meant as a word. I didn't know about it as a profession. I kind of walked into it because it allowed me to communicate without having to talk too much. I guess I've gotten beyond that, but now it was easy transition to go from one extreme of going to UC Berkeley, which was a Beaux-Arts school at the time, which is to study nothing but European architecture that I couldn't relate to. And then at USC, many of the people there happened to be World War II vets, and they were very accepting of, the things I knew, like the gardens of Kyoto and all of these things, and how I looked at art and the environment. So I'm trying to define all that whole trip right now. Yeah. It's a good question, but boy, it'll open up the Pandora's box for me. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think, Joy, do you want to wrap us up now?
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Frank and Naomi and Brian and Yvonne and Sean and everyone who is involved with this program. And thank you to everyone who is watching today. It's really exciting to be able to explore these histories and connect them to broader stories, but also have such a personal connection with you, Frank, here. So thank you so much for sharing with us. On that, this book is available, and Frank was gracious enough to sign many copies for our store. So you can find that in the link that I put in the chat at janumstore.com. And we hope that if you enjoyed this program, you consider supporting Janum and becoming a member. And please also check out and support and look into the links that Yvonne shared from the Arcadia Library. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I'll stay on for a few moments so you can stay, so all attendees can find all the links in the chat before you leave. But with that, thank you so much to you all, and I hope you have a really wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you at the next Janum from Home program and the next Nikkei Federation program, and thank you to you all. Bye-bye.